was young, there were so many things I wanted to be. I wanted to be an actor. I used to go to the movies and I'd see Errol Flynn on the screen, you know. I wanted to be Errol Flynn. In fact, I don't know if you remember Errol Flynn, but he was wonderful. He played Robin Hood, Captain Blood, Dodge City. He was the sheriff of Dodge City. He was always a hero. And I used to walk out of the theater, maybe I was 10, 11 years old, after having seen an Errol Flynn movie. And I'd have a crooked little smile on my face, thinking that looks like the way he smiled. And I'd have an imaginary sword at my side. And I'd be looking to see if some bully was picking on a little girl so I could protect her, you know. I guess I lived in a dream world.
Movies probably were the biggest influence on my writing. Almost every idea I got was from a movie, and usually a bad movie. A good movie, you're totally absorbed in, so your brain just goes along with it. A bad movie, my mind would drift off. Like when I saw Dracula, not that it was that bad, but my mind drifted off, and I thought, if one vampire is scary, what if the whole world was full of vampires? which ended up as my novel, I Am Legend.
My favorites were Betty Grable movies, the musicals. Betty Grable was a top star for 20th Century Fox, and at one time the most popular movie star in the world. And she was the pinup girl for all of the soldiers and sailors and Marines in World War II. She was just wonderful, and I loved her musicals. I loved the MGM musical, mostly musicals. And then there was James Stewart, who was my favorite actor growing up because he reminded me of my dad.
Well, when I was a kid, I loved all of the great physical comedians. To this day, I'm a Laurel and Hardy fan. As I look back at the things, even today, that relationship that they developed is unlike any other comedy team that ever existed. I loved Chaplin, I loved Buster Keaton, and all the great silent film comedians.
And by then, it was the glorious days of Orson Welles, and some of us, quote, wanted to be Orson Welles when we grew up. We didn't want to speak like that, but he was brilliant as a director and a producer and very creative, thoughtful.
When I was a kid going to movies, my favorites were Charlie Chaplin, W.C. Fields, Laurel and Hardy, and Buster Keaton. They were the giants.
As a kid, I was influenced by the movies Bob Hope, Red Skelton, Abbott and Costello, because they would suddenly stop and maybe turn to the camera and address the audience in the theater. And this is something I'd never seen before. When Bob Hope and Bing Crosby would do a movie, and you could tell they'd have inside jokes back and hey, I just loved that, because up until that time, if you saw comedians, it was the Ritz Brothers maybe, or Hells a-Poppin'. But it was, it really influenced me as a kid, and I think I thought that's what I'd like to be.
I had been inspired by seeing two movies that I still think are wonderful. The black and white version of The Hunchback of Notre Dame with Charles Laughton as the Hunchback, which came out in 1939, is still to me one of the great all-time makeups. The second was Spencer Tracy's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is minimal makeup, but still was, very fascinating. That was in '40. So the first makeup I ever attempted to do on myself was The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
I learned from them. I watched them. I looked at them and go, boy. And then you superimpose your own personality on top of it, but you have that background of what the wealth you can draw from. And that's what I mean by being prepared. If you're prepared for luck, you have to be prepared for luck. It comes your way, and it'll come to everybody's way. A little luck, and if you're prepared for it, you can make it. If you're not, then if you flew off, goodbye. So you have to work with luck and with fate.